My name is Mobeena. It gives me so much pleasure to be somebody who gets to host this conversation today with Ma'am Lyane Guillaume. A short introduction to her. She is somebody who is a writer. She's a French novelist. And today, in particular, the work that we will be discussing is a piece of historical fiction. And I also found out that she is a professor of French literature. That makes me very excited. The title of the conversation that we get to have today is called Jahanara, because that is the title of her book. I'm sure that she will show it to you in a second. If you do know Jahanara, that's wonderful. If you don't know Jahanara, very quick introduction to her. She was Shahjahan's daughter. Shahjahan is the Mughal emperor who is known most for his architecture, and she was also Aurangzeb's sister. When we think about Lahore, I think we often get caught between Anarkali and Noor Jahan, and somehow Jahanara gets left out. So I think I would love to hear how you started, and how did it begin with the Mughals?
Thank you very much. She's my fairy. We just heard about socialite. I will speak now about another socialite of the old times, a Mughal princess, because she was also a socialite in a way. But before that, I want to thank Mr. Razi, director of the festival, the ambassador of France in Pakistan, Mr. Gallet, Mr. Piton, Counselor for Culture in the French Embassy, Mr. Hassan, Cultural Attaché, and Mr. Didier, Director of the Alliance Francaise in Lahore. So,
how did you start?
So this is Jahanara was my first publication. 1989, so it's already quite a long time. So I had to come here. I had to deepen myself again in this story, but I did it with a lot of pleasure. So this book was published in 1989, the first book in French about Jahanara Begum, Shahjahan's eldest daughter. It was translated into English in 2000, I was in Kiev at that time, 2003, I think, by East West. It's a publishing house which does not exist anymore, but translated by two Hindu women. And so it was quite well received in India. So, first question, what is my legitimacy? As a French, how did I happen to write a book on Jahanara Begum, eldest daughter of Mughal Emperor Shahjahan? Everything started with a love story, of course. I'll tell you. My fiancé, Olivier, who has become my husband and who is still my husband, had been posted in Kabul, Afghanistan in 1979 as an archaeologist. Myself, I completed my studies in humanities and joined him in Afghanistan, and I arrived in Kabul 3 months before the Red Army invaded Afghanistan. But I had a project of a PhD, learn Persian, and I did well to learn Persian. For a young woman who had always dreamed of writing, it was a good opportunity. At that time, unfortunately, the fashion in France was a nouveau roman, a kind of a kind of new novel which wanted to get rid of all the basic elements of traditional novel. The stories, the historic situation, even the characters. So the fashion was the adventure of writing and not the writing of adventure. But myself, I was in Afghanistan. I wanted to write about adventure. The adventure of writing was not anymore my concern. So, my fiancé and I, we did not leave the country. We did not leave Afghanistan at this time, of the time of the invasion, contrary to many French people. The French embassy wanted us to go. We had chosen to stay. So I stayed in Kabul, and I learned Persian, and I read a lot about the history of Afghanistan, especially the Mughals. I got fascinated by this Mughal dynasty. Because it's an incredible story. It lasted so long. We shall speak about it afterwards. Why did it last so long? So this incredible dynasty, which Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh have in common. So that is why when Olivier, my husband, was posted in India after our marriage in Kabul in 1981, we got married in Kabul, I accompanied him in Delhi and went on with my passion for the Great Mughals. So I discovered the Great Mughals in Kabul, Afghanistan. From Kabul, I had the opportunity to travel on the trace of Jahanara. I came to Lahore from Kabul, and it was a real discovery of this fort, which is just incredible, Jangir's tomb and all that. So I accompanied him in India. I must say something about Babur, the founder of the Mughal dynasty. He was, to make it short, Babur was a descendant of Timur-Lenk and Genghis Khan. It means he was of Turco-Mongol origin, but very much influenced by Persian culture through Timur. He was born in Andijan, nowadays Uzbekistan, conquered Samarkand, lost it, conquered Kabul, and then Delhi in 1526, after he defeated Ibrahim Lodi, the Sultan of Delhi. This Battle of Panipat in 1526 marks the beginning of the Mughal dynasty. And believe me, Babur is my best friend, because I have been living in Afghanistan. He loved Afghanistan. He conquered Kabul. He is buried in Kabul. There is a beautiful garden about him, and his grave is in Kabul. Babur was born in Andijan, which is now Uzbekistan. I've been living 4 beautiful years of my life in Uzbekistan. I wrote also about Uzbekistan. And of course, he created this Mughal dynasty. I lived myself many years in India. So I accompanied him, as I accompanied my husband, through all these adventures. So most of you are familiar with Mughals, so I won't insist, but from father to son, the Mughal emperors were, after Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, whose grave is here, Shahjahan, Aurangzeb. Those are called Great Mughals. The others, very numerous also, are denied the title of Great Mughals. But even though the dynasty lasted till the second half of the 19th century, it has been one of the richest, one of the longest dynasty in the world. In itself, it is something extraordinary. Alors, at first, I was 33. At first, I was attracted by the beauty, the glimmer of Mughal Empire, as it can be seen in the miniatures. Gardens with all kinds of flowers, birds, fountains, canals, terraces, with beautifully attired young princes and prince and princess, listening to music, to poetry, Persian poetry, Sufi poetry, talking with, meeting calligraphers, philosophers, scholars, and all that. The beauty of these miniatures attracted me not only by the poetry of it, but also by the realism. All these miniatures are very realistic in terms of design and show an acute sense of observation. So, of course, I visited all the places linked with the Mughals, and there are several episodes of my book which take place in Lahore. There is an episode with hunting episode with Najabat Khan, who was with whom Jahanara, Princess Jahanara, fell in love. As contrary to many readers, I love descriptions in novels, and I wanted to describe those in a novel. It seemed to me that Mughal architecture, art, all that concentrated the best of the Eastern dream as a myth. You know, in Europe, in the West in general, we have this dream of Orient, the East Orient. And this Mughal empire was really the concentration of all this, of this dream, of this myth. It was like a myth. You know that the French perfume brand Guerlain created its best perfume, Shalimar, of course, like the Shalimar Gardens. So, you know, this is part of this myth about the East. I chose to concentrate on the reign of Shahjahan because it was, of course, the image of this paradise, but at the same time, it's a period of contrast between the appearance of glamour and what is behind this the curtain, what is behind this fairy tale. Frustrations, trials, murders, tragedies, crimes, all this, you know, you have this beautiful image of the Mughal Empire, and behind, as a paradise, and behind it, it's like evil, in fact, what happened during this, the reign of Shahjahan and the time of Jahanara. So that's why I concentrated on Shahjahan's time, because of this contrast, refinement and cruelty. For example, you know, I was recently in Malta, and I saw paintings by the Caravage, and I thought that this episode of Jahanara's life could have been painted by the Caravage or Jericho. Aurangzeb, still a prince, sending to his father Shahjahan the head cut by himself of his elder brother and enemy, Darashuko, in a box, like a present. So this is something very terrible, and I could see the Caravage painting this episode. And so the contrasts are always at stake in Shahjahan reigns, and it makes it very attractive for historians, but for storytellers also. It's a real epic. We have interesting testimonies in French about Shahjahan's reign and the beginning of Aurangzeb's reign by French people, French travelers, Bernier and Tavernier. Bernier, an adventurer, was also a physicist, a philosopher, and a scholar, was the first Frenchman to describe the Taj Mahal, for example. Now, the point, why a Mughal princess, a woman? I wanted a female character for several reasons. The status of women in Islam also interested very much. Was it in a feminist approach? Not at all. the first posting of my husband, I told you, was Afghanistan. I wanted to write a book about Afghanistan, and so I had to interview people. I could not decently interview men. Even, in 1979, 1980, it would have... So I started to interview women. It started like that. It was not from a feminist approach. And I found it so interesting to interview women. They are always so sincere, so, I would say, straightforward, that after India, when I started to live in India, in Uzbekistan, in Ukraine, I went on with this habit of interviewing women. And it was always a pleasure and great, very useful. So that's how I started to, we shall speak about it afterwards. I started to write a kind of novel, which I called a documentary fiction. I keep all the ingredients of the traditional novel, contrary to the nouveau roman, a plot, suspense sometimes, characters, of course, strong characters, historical background, many informations. No, I mean, I keep all the basic of the traditional novel, but with a lot of informations, historic, sociological, and about the country I'm talking about. So, in fact, Jahanara was my first documentary fiction. Alors, now why Jahanara Begum precisely? I could have chosen her mother, Mumtaz Mahal, so glamorous, so she's also like a myth, too much of a myth. For whom Shahjahan built the famous Taj Mahal. I could have chosen also Noor Jahan, for whom Shahjahan, Jahangir's wife, who lived many years in Lahore, building husband's grave. But the first one, Mumtaz Mahal, was maybe too much of a myth, a face, too discreet. And the second one, Noor Jahan, was something of an intrigant, maybe too much. Jahanara, for me, is just in between, at the same time, a face, a myth, but also a brain, and a very positive brain. While Noor Jahan was very tricky and ambitious for herself. Jahanara was never ambitious for herself. And this is also one of my, not a problem, but I wondered, how can Jahanara be so like a saint everywhere? Are there any historians who found problems with Jahanara, who criticized her, or this? I don't know. So, as I told you, mine was the first book about her. And I chose a biography. I'm not an historian. So how could I write in the name of Jahanara? I found it very, she's a very inspiring woman, but also I found it much more vivid to write in the name of her. So I studied a lot, I read a lot about her to do something really historically credible. But at the same time, in any biography, there are some, you don't know everything. So I had chosen to put a little bit of myself into the intervals of this life. she was, what is very fascinating, first she was she had an artistic mind, she was very good, she contributed to design the gardens and all this. She had a very good education, mathematics, poetry, and all that. She was also a deep spiritual mind, and maybe, why did she become so powerful? First, she was the eldest brother, and after the death of her mother, she was only 17, but she became the counselor of Shahjahan in a way, and she became very rich, very powerful. Being the eldest daughter, being also a very religious mind, I think that Shahjahan could respected her a lot. And what is also very quite incredible is that all along her life, her best friend was Darashuko, the eldest. Her eldest brother was the eldest, was supposed to become emperor after Shahjahan. But she considered him the best heir. But at the same time, after she was put in prison in the Red Fort with her father by Aurangzeb, but after Shahjahan's death in 1666, Aurangzeb asked her to come to his court to replace Roshanara, who didn't like Jahanara. Roshanara always favored Aurangzeb. But when Jahanara arrived at Aurangzeb's court, she decided to forget about all problems with Aurangzeb, and she decided to accept his invitation to as a counselor. She really behaved as a counselor of Shahjahan, and then after that, of Aurangzeb. So my first, one of my, she died in 1681, and her grave is in Delhi, and it's a very simple grave, and she had written herself the verses on the grave. Let green grass cover my grave, because grass is enough for the humbles. She has been humble her whole life, and she considered, so she wanted a very humble grave. So I have no time to speak about the, she was a Chisti, and after that she became a Qaderi. But anyway, she always was a Sufi. And as a Sufi, very open-minded, like Akbar. It was a tradition in the Mughal family to be a Sufi. But at the end of her life, she was Qaderi, and she wrote a biography of me and me as Chisti Sufi. Yes, alors, now I think it's time to end up. For me, my best reward was to discover that some Indian people thought that my book was the real memoirs of Jahanara. She never wrote memoirs, but she had Humayun's sister, Babur's daughter, who was Humayun's sister and Akbar's aunt, Gulbadan, wrote the Humayun Nama. So Jahanara could herself have written a Nama also, maybe Darashuko's Nama. Anyway, so it's not so didactic. It's not a real conference. I didn't know whether I had to make a conference or to. So I hope you're not. It's not too long or too.
No. I think it's a wonderful
too much in a
overview.
disorder.
Yeah. No, I think it's a wonderful overview. I think living in Pakistan, many of us hold a fascination with the Mughals, partly because it is the most prominent past here in Lahore, but also because, like Lyane said, it has left behind such a rich legacy. And I'm so glad that you talked about this a little bit, because I think when I was a student, especially in college, one of the things that I struggled with so much was how could the Mughals have all this keen sense of poetry, of art, of architecture, and yet when you sort of, when you I guess read like a historian, one of the first things that comes up is, there was Jahangir rebelled against Akbar, and then all of this really blew out in Shahjahan's reign when Aurangzeb killed Tara Shikoh and imprisoned his father. There's also a very beautiful painting. It's by Abindranath Tagore. It's called The Passing of Shahjahan. And there's a figure in the center. I'm going to assume that that's been Jahanara. I think about that painting sometimes a lot. It's very beautiful. Okay, so I think struggled with women, particularly when we're thinking about Mughal history, because it's so sort of emperor-centric, it's so power-centric, it's so, well, how did their legacy kind of leave an impact? And I struggled with women and almost their lack of feeling in a way, right? So you mentioned Jahanara almost comes across as a saint, but when I read your book...
Between brackets.
Yeah, of course. But
please take,
yeah, but when you wrote your book, it was it's talking about Jahanara falling in love, but then there's also the angle of maybe she's falling in love with her father, and there's all these sort of intrigues that we come across as historians or people who study the past, and it can be a little difficult to tell, okay, well, this is blurring the lines, this is somebody who's just kind of throwing in gossip in there. So I guess my question is, how did you approach this angle of love? And the second is, when you read the biographies or when you read these primary sources, it can sometimes be difficult to be like, okay, this I want to incorporate or that I want to leave out. So how did you do all of that for this novel?
I couldn't hear very well.
Okay. So how did you decide that?
In love, yeah. You mean Jahanara's love affairs? Or what?
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, something very important I forgot to tell you. She was forbidden to marry. Akbar, her grandfather, decided that the Mughal princes shouldn't marry in case their husband would, make intrigue and take the power instead of the emperor. So she was forbidden to marry. She had no children, and maybe it's one of the reasons why she became so powerful, because she could interfere in any other field. She had no family to look after, and she educated her niece. Zebunissa was Zebunissa, Aurangzeb's daughter, became a scholar. It's partly thanks to Jahanara, who looked after her, and. She had, of course, she had love affairs, I guess. One man who is quite well known is Najabat Khan. Her love affair with Najabat Khan was discovered, and he was punished.
Okay.
We don't know much about this, but Najabat Khan was one of our lovers. There is a rumor about incest with Shahjahan. We all have heard about this. Nobody knows. Yeah. They were put in jail in the Red Fort together. They had many in common, of course, spiritually, intellectually, and So we don't know much about that, but in fact, Shahjahan himself, no, a scholar at the time of Shahjahan said, why shouldn't the tree not taste his fruit?
Okay.
Something like that. So you see, it's quite, voilà.
Yeah.
You know, something that people don't know much about is also a tradition of homosexuality in, you know, the Bachabas in the Mughal court, in the Persian tradition, in the Turkish tradition also. But it was also among women. And if you, I think Bernier speak about that in his book, and also I read a lot about Muslim women at the time of Timor-Leste, and there is a Spanish ambassador who was in Samarkand at that time, and who said that at the court of the great people, there were women together and drinking wine, and so I don't know how to interpret all that.
Fun fact:
and also, sorry, but there is, you know, in Sufism, there is much tolerance towards love in general, drinking wine, feeling happy, and love in all its aspects.
Yeah, fun fact, the incest theme is not only there between Jahanara and Shahjahan, it's there with other Mughal stories as well. It's always fun to read, but on a slightly different note, I think something that strikes me and something that makes me almost a little envious is when you approached the Mughal Empire, you got to go through it in Kabul, Lahore, and Delhi. And in 2025, I don't have that access. So I think what I'm wondering is, as you went from Kabul and then Lahore and then you went to Delhi,
In Lahore, it was just for a trip, as a tourist.
Okay.
I didn't live in Lahore.
So were there sort of changes in perceptions around how people viewed or understood Jahanara? If you spoke to somebody about Jahanara, how was their response?
How she's considered?
I mean, how she's considered, how was she viewed? I just sometimes wonder, because I think, it's okay.
People speak about Mumtaz Mahal, a little about Noor Jahan also, but Jahanara, not so many people. And you know, I like to speak in my documentary fictions about people who are not very well known, but who deserve to be well known. For example, my latest book is about, who won a prize given by the Académie Française, is about a ballerina of the Russian troupe of Diaghilev, who was as well known as Anna Pavlova at her time, but who has become less well known. And she was a better ballerina, to my mind, than Anna Pavlova. And she was very intelligent. She died when she was 83, something like that. And nobody knows about her. That's why I chose to write about her. Her name was Tamara Karsavina. And that's my, my publisher sometimes tells me, why don't you write about, for example, Georges Sand? But why? We have already so many books about Georges Sand. We saw everything about Georges Sand. Why should I write something about Georges Sand? I prefer to write about someone less well known, because you bring new elements, you make people discover something new.
Yeah,
So that was my approach with Jahanara.
Yeah, okay. I will end this session with one final question, which is the length of the Mughal Empire. And I'm so glad that you went through, like, these were the great Mughals, and then you have the rest of the Mughals.
You know, alors, we could enlarge the subject a lot, but I wondered why did this empire last so long? And a Pakistani historian has written that it was because the dynasty was not settled on religion, only religion itself, but on culture.
Okay.
On a culture means several religions, but also poetry, history, and all that. A culture, not only a religion. And it's not me, it's an historian, a Pakistani historian. And the same historian said that the decay of Mughal Empire started when Aurangzeb started to become, it's not my word, it is his historian's word, a Taliban.
I mean, that's...
We still have time.
I think we don't, but thank you so much. I do want to mention that Lyane's book is going to be a part of the Alliance Francaise. So I'm excited that there's a memoir about Jahanara, and it's historical fiction, and I'm so excited.
I wanted to say I leave a copy in English of my Jahanara in the Alliance Francaise. So if, voilà.
Yes, I think it's worth reading. It's very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.